British general election is underway. The debate, three main parties of the extreme centre committed to austerity, welfare cuts and privatisation, and above all, keeping the Scottish National Party out of the British government. Welcome to the thrill of democracy. Why are British elections such drab, dispiriting affairs? Why has there been such a steep decline in electoral participation in all the rich parliamentary democracies, a tendency greatly advanced in Britain? Average general election turnout in the industrialised core in the 2000s was 72.5%, and in Britain, in the same period, it varied between 60 and 65%. Among the poor and the unemployed, the abstention rate is highest. In the last election, the constituencies with the highest unemployment saw turnouts of around 44%. We're heading towards an increasingly Americanized system where the poor don't vote because they see all the parties as being basically the same. This mostly harmed Labour, with 5 million working class votes lost between 1997 and 2010, and many voters giving up or seceding to the SNP, Plaid Cymru, and now the Greens. Yet the Tory base is also fragmented, with elements of its lower middle class vote disappearing into the camp of UKIP, a far-right party which, as the Daily Telegraph reports, will take most of its votes from the Conservative base. The Liberals, who once defended a few rudiments of social justice, have now played a leading role in an unpopular austerity government, and now they too will reap the electoral fallout. So, as millions of Britons increasingly boycott the representative system or seek alternatives, how does our media choose to reflect on this state of democratic malaise? What causes do they adduce for it? And what solutions do they allow to be heard? It is understandable that the media is unable to tell us about this crisis in democracy. The media is owned and run by wealthy and well-connected people who have everything in common with the 1% and nothing in common with the bottom 30 to 40% who don't vote. In the UK, the media is the fourth biggest source of millionaires outside of property, finance and industry. There is a revolving door linking influential media personnel with the top companies and government agencies. So their bewilderment at the non-voting poor and patronising tendency to see it, where it is even looked at, as a form of apathy, is part of the class perspective of the 1%. But also, because elections are a spectacle, the media has to pretend that they're more exciting than they actually are. The big issue in this election is the policy of austerity, entailing deep cuts to the public sector and social security. The Conservatives' right-wing austerity agenda is unashamed and acknowledged. But what of Labour? Consider the Blairite columnist Dan Hodges in The Telegraph. This election, he says, is the most exciting election for years. Ed Miliband is running unashamedly from the left, Cameron from the right. Or the Labour loyalist Polly Toynbee, who laments in The Guardian that disaffected voters are not being wowed by Labour's radical policies, thus risking the return of David Cameron to Downing Street. Or GQ, which identifies Miliband's stance on taxes, energy prices and rent controls as left-wing. Blair himself has let it be known that he worries that Miliband is too left-wing to win, as reported in this Daily Telegraph article. Missing in this picture is the chief reason why Labour's share of the vote has plummeted from the low 40s 2 years ago to the low 30s today. Labour Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls has committed the party to implementing all of the government's spending cuts. Now, given that Labour's primary campaign theme is the cost of living crisis, the longest decline in living standards in generations, this is a serious impediment to their success. How can they address the crisis when they have no money to do so? The debate, then, is between three big parties who accept with differing degrees of emphasis that austerity is a necessity. Nor is it just in the big picture that Labour are imitating the Conservatives. As David Cameron bashes benefit recipients, planning to make obese claimants attend weight loss programmes as reported in The Guardian, or cutting benefits for the under-25s as reported by the BBC, Labour scrambles to catch up. In fact, Labour has made it clear that it agrees with government plans to cut off benefits for young people under 25. As Cameron attacked those welfare recipients he called shirkers and skivers, Labour Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Rachel Reeves went so far as to say that Labour does not represent people on benefits, it being the party of people in work and not those out of work. As The Independent points out, most of those on benefits are actually in work. To its credit, Labour opposes the government on the privatisation of the NHS. But what is only occasionally discussed in the press is that it was the last Labour government which began the process of outsourcing and privatisation. The campaigning website Open Democracy is one of the few outlets which actually has covered it. As health expert Alison Pollock points out, many elements of the government's Health and Social Care Act are based on previous government policy. Likewise, Labour has been mildly critical of the government's policy of free schools, handing schools over to the private sector. Yet it makes clear that it has nothing in principle against such moves. Tristram Hunt, Shadow Education Secretary, told the BBC that they back parent-led schools and would not shut most existing free schools. And once again, this idea builds on the previous Labour government's policy. So why aren't people voting? Or why are they voting for smaller parties? Because the difference between the big parties is a difference not of principle, but of emphasis and timing. Both major parties are promising to crack down on immigrants. With most voters demanding that immigration be reduced or stopped, The Guardian reports with some concern that too few voters have any understanding of the positive impact of immigration on the economic recovery. But why might they be deceived about this? Could it be that almost no newspaper or national television network or politician has discussed this fact, and that almost every mention of immigrants in the news describes them as illegal, a threat, or a burden on public services, as dissected in this New Statesman piece? This is where UKIP, a party of the racist right, comes in. The British media, having by and large prepared the ground for UKIP by scapegoating immigrants, have given UKIP coverage way out of proportion to their actual level of support, shown again by the New Statesman. Missing from most of the media's coverage has been the voice of immigrants themselves, even though they could help to decide the election in some areas like London. And this is partly why, as The Independent reported, taking a hard line on immigration might cost the Conservatives victory. As the extreme centre parties hold on for dear life, it seems increasingly clear that neither of the big parties will be able to form a viable government alone, both polling just less than a third of the popular vote. Apart from UKIP and the Greens, the biggest challenger to the Westminster parties is the SNP, a nationalist party of the centre-left which has 47% of the vote in Scotland and looks set to take 53 of Scotland's 59 seats, leaving Labour as a tiny rump party. Even the huge Labour majorities in Glasgow will be decimated on current trends. This is the cost of Labour's alliance with the Tories over the independence referendum. And after the media's increasingly naked campaign against Scottish independence, arguably most ferocious in the supposedly neutral domain of the BBC, the same media are in a tailspin about the prospect of the SNP being the kingmaker in the coming Parliament. Why? Because the SNP is a moderate, centre-left party that is against austerity, for public spending, and against the £100 billion Trident replacement programme. And you cannot challenge the consensus either on the economy or the war machine. In fact, it is right-wing media and pundits who are most concerned about Labour losing Scotland. As Ian Martin argues in The Telegraph, the union is finished if Labour are routed. The Telegraph's leader column argues for a Labour-Tory united front to stop the SNP just as a similar front stopped independence. Ian Birrell in The Guardian agrees it's the only way to stop a constitutional crisis. And above all, the Tories and the right-wing press have urged Labour to rule out any coalition with the SNP. Miliband has responded to this pressure by capitulating and, in a twist of irony, claiming that it's the SNP who are in an unholy alliance with the Tories. But there are encouraging signs of uncertainty about the result, with a 90% probability that no single party will be able to form a government. As ever, the markets are having their say, warning that the success of the smaller parties will be punished by a city attack on sterling, an old technique of the financial class for influencing political outcomes. The same technique was used by the city in 2010 when no party won a majority in order to lobby in favour of a Conservative-led coalition government. Fortunately for them, the civil service came to the rescue and almost barely reported put pressure on the Conservatives and Liberals to form a strong, pro-austerity government. The same civil servants also blocked an inquiry into phone hacking to spare Cameron's blushes before that election, as The Guardian reported. So this is the problem. We have elections in which the agenda is set by parties which mostly agree on the substance and media organisations which are part of the same club. They don't just report on policy making, they make policy and they help secure the consent for it. This is the media's role in our managed democracy.